Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Future Leader Sessions. We are super excited to have an amazing panel discussion for you over the next 90 minutes. We're going to be letting people into the Zoom room in the next couple of minutes and getting everything set up. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, welcome. We are really excited. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode that we have. And we've got over 500 people subscribed today. So it's bound to be a busy session. And I'm super excited to let you know how you can get involved and interact with us today. So I'm just going to take a second to share my screen. I'm hoping that this is going to work, guys. I want to bring up onto the screen the amazing panelists that we have today, because guys, if you're in regulatory affairs, you will know some of these faces for sure. And in just a second, we're going to bring them live as well to introduce themselves. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit more about how this session is going to run if you haven't joined any of the Future Leader sessions before, because it's something a little bit different. I can absolutely guarantee you are in for an absolute treat. So housekeeping, couple of things for you to know. We've got people joining us from all over the world, and you're going to be joining us either in Zoom. So if you're in Zoom, welcome. Or you might be watching us via LinkedIn Live, and we're really excited to have you watching us wherever you are in the world. We want you to interact. This is an interactive session. So you're going to be able to interact with us using Slido. I'm going to show you a QR code in just a second. So get your phone ready to scan the QR code, because that is going to be our central place of interaction. You're going to have the chance to ask questions to the panelists. You're going to have the chance to upvote questions that you really like the look of to make sure that we're answering them. And then we're going to be able to have polls and interact in Slido. So get ready for that QR code. It's coming in a second. If you have tech issues and you're in Zoom, use the Zoom chat for support. If you have tech issues on LinkedIn, unfortunately, we won't be able to help you, but we're hoping that it's all going to work out okay. And we've had loads of experience in our earlier sessions with LinkedIn. So welcome, everybody. I know we've still got a few more people joining. I'm just in the housekeeping intro, so you haven't missed anything. Yes, we will be recording the session, and it's going to be available on Elemed's website. And whilst you're there, you can also check out some of the earlier sessions. This is number 6. So that means that there's 5 other episodes of amazing content, all about leadership, all about future leaders and what you need to do to prepare yourself for the future as a leader in the regulated quality and clinical space. Timeliness, we will not overrun, guys. So get ready for the next 90 minutes to focus and get the maximum value that you can. And finally, feedback is really important to us here at Elemed. So keep an eye on your emails, because we will be sending a follow-up. We'd love to know what you liked about the session and what we can improve for the next one. We'll be doing more and more of these later on in the year as well into 2025, because they're so popular. So get ready, guys. I'm going to share with you the QR code. Here it is. It should be up on your screen right now. Please take a second to scan it with your phone, and you will be able to open a link to Slido that is going to take you directly in to the central place where everybody is going to communicate. So whether you're joining us on Zoom or whether you're joining us on LinkedIn, you can scan this QR code and you can interact with us from wherever you are in the world. We won't be monitoring messages on any other channel except for Slido. So if you have a question that you want our panelists to answer, make sure you're putting it in Slido. Don't put it in Zoom. Don't put it on LinkedIn. Put it here in Slido by scanning this QR code and writing your question there. So let's give Slido a try. Let us know where you're joining from. So if you're looking at your Slido, in just a second, you should see a question popping up on your screen where you can let us know where in the world you are joining from. And so I'm going to read out some of the answers. So we've got somebody from the UK, we've got people from France joining us, so European, Belgium, Madrid, Switzerland. So we've got people really very strongly in Europe. We've got Basel, we've got Germany, we've got the Netherlands. And I hope you're all having amazing weather, by the way, because I'm working from home today and it's absolutely boiling hot. Sun is shining. It couldn't be a better day for it. We've got people from the Netherlands. We've got Belgium, North Devon, very specific. Welcome, welcome Austria. So really, this is an international crowd, so I'm super excited to have you all here, but this is a lot of talking from me. So I'm going to just stop my screen right now, and I'm going to take a second to introduce you to our panelists. And actually, our panelists are going to introduce themselves. So Donielle, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Donielle Johnson. I am the former Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Bausch & Lomb. I'm currently doing some consulting as I take care of some personal things and look for my next opportunity. I am an American who spent the last 10 years living in the Netherlands. So I live in Amsterdam, but I'm originally from New Orleans.
Thanks so much, Donielle. And let's go now over to Megha.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. I'm Megha Iyer. I work in regulatory affairs and have done so for the past couple of decades, I think. I lead policy and advocacy for Thermo Fisher, basically ensuring that we're being compliant, that we are looking at all the different regulations coming on the horizon, and we're poised to meet it and influence it. I'm based in the UK, actually very close to London Heathrow. So if you hear a plane fly by, you know where I am.
Thank you so much and welcome, Megha. Michael, let's go over to you next.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this fantastic event. I'm really happy to see all of our key leaders over here. So thank you for that. And let me introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Michael Konings, as you see. I am currently the head of regulatory affairs for image-guided therapy systems at Philips, IGTS. I'm located in the Netherlands, and my team consists of around 170 people worldwide, where we split up in what we call a business unit. So those that are really part of the BU from business that manages European, US regulations. And then there is this big group spread around the world to make sure that we do local specific country support and local submissions directly with our competent authorities and regulators locally.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your introduction. And finally, I do feel like I'm a little bit doing the Eurovision, going country to country, but finally, we're going to go to the other side of the pond, and we're going to welcome Ankur. So, Ankur.
Yes. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Elena. Thank you for having us all here. I'm really excited about this opportunity. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. I'm Ankur Kaushal. I currently serve as the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at a company called Imperative Care, which is in the stroke and vascular space here, based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I recently joined this role. I've in my past spent time at a range of organizations, including Medtronic, J&J, Abbott, Advanced Bionics, or Sonova org, based in Switzerland. All of that in regulatory affairs. My background is in biomedical engineering, but somehow I find myself spending now a little over 16 years in regulatory affairs and enjoyed every single second of it, as I'm sure all of the rest of my RA colleagues on this panel will say. My interest in having this conversation, and the reason I said yes when Elena asked, is because I think all of us will agree, sharing our experience with our space enriches ourselves first, and then helps us grow as a group. So I'm really excited about that. Thanks for having us, Elena.
Thank you and welcome, everybody. And again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know that you're all over the world at the moment listening in live to this conversation that we're having on creating a great team culture. If you missed the intro that I did at the beginning, I'm going to quickly share my screen and bring up a QR code. Please scan that QR code. We're going to start by going through some general questions around culture and leadership, but there will be a quick fire round where we're going to be asking questions that you, the audience, want to put to our panelists. And by scanning this QR code, it's going to take you to Slido. You can add your question. If you don't have a question to add, you can actually look through questions that other people have put and upvote the ones that you want us to get to. And I will be addressing those with our panelists in order of popularity. So please interact with us, scan this QR code, get onto Slido and get ready for a really interesting conversation. Right, so that's enough about that. So let's get into it then. So we're going to be talking about creating a great team culture today. And I'm really interested in all of your experiences, actually, can you talk to me a little bit about a time where you felt a team had an outstanding culture, and what were the ingredients that made that culture outstanding? I'm interested in all of your experiences, so I'm going to start with Megha to give us her view.
Sure. I have been very fortunate to experience that, and currently experience that in Thermo Fisher, which is why I've stayed for as long as 11 years now. I think a really important ingredient of that is certainly being goal-oriented and task-oriented, but also caring for the people along the way. I think sometimes there can be easily a sense of where you leave people behind and the project goes forward, and that's winning, but that's not winning together. And so I'd say that the act of bringing people along with you on your journey, it takes you much farther than going it alone. So I'd say that would be a good ingredient.
So bringing people along and winning hearts and minds would be your ingredient. Okay, Michael, what would you say?
I think it's a good question to kick off this session. I think for me, perhaps also to what is an outstanding culture. I think I define it as a supportive, productive, enjoyable working environment, which I think is the key to have a good relationship. I currently have a team which I really like in that sense, and I think we are really an outstanding cultural team. Also in the past, I had multiple moments where we had that outstanding culture, but it wasn't always that positive, that fun in the meantime. It takes time to grow. And in my personal feeling, it's very important to have a sense of purpose as a team, to make sure that you have a strategy, to make sure that you have clear goals, understanding each other, what you do and don't do. And with that, build communication, respect, and trust to one another. Within Philips, we have what we call an EES score. I will not make the answer too long, but an employee engagement score. And that really asks also the people, what do you think as a team member, if this is a cultural, appropriate and good team? I think that's always the biggest the biggest benefit, knowing what your team does, because I might think of it as a leader as having a great team culture, an outstanding culture, but the team has indicated that due to engagement, feeling of psychological safety, skills and empowerment of the team, that with that we create that outstanding culture as a team. That would be my ingredient.
Thank you. With those ingredients, we can make a whole cake. So thank you for giving us lots of different insights there. Danielle, I'm going to go to you to talk to us about an example. You're on mute, Danielle.
When I first got into regulatory affairs at Medtronic, we were all new to regulatory. I think the passion for the new technology and the team's winning spirit, that everyone was along on that same journey. So similar to what Megan said, it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We all were inspired by the technology. We were all passionate. It was most of our first jobs in regulatory. So we were fresh out of grad school. We were a group of, I say, untainted to the corporate world realities. And we supported one another. We wanted to see everyone win. So I always tell my team, my motto is, we will win or we will lose as a team, right? So I think that's for me, if the team is aligned on the goals, the objectives, and there is no one that is, it's all about me, and we're all aligned on how do we support one another, to me, those are the winning recipes. And to be excited. I don't say you have to come to work every day like, oh, I love my job, cheerleader, because we all have those days, right? Where the PMA, you got the crazy questions, you got a deficiency, you haven't heard back from the notified body. But how are the people around you lifting you up on those days? How are you guys all supporting one another through those challenges, right? And do you really feel like a team, right? And I think when you talk about a winning team, I've worked with people where we were a collective of individuals. We weren't a team. So, right, thinking about the recipes that make a team and what's important in a team structure, I look at you have to be aligned to the same goals. Does that mean you have to get there the same way? Absolutely not. You have to have strengths and weaknesses balances, right? And you guys, at some point, you have to be a little bit excited about what you do every day, and it has to connect to some way your personal mission.
Thank you, Danielle. That's really interesting answer. And here you're talking really about that team spirit and getting everybody aligned and on the same page and supporting each other. So I really like your insight there. Ankur, from your side.
Yeah, so Danielle, I'm so glad that you brought up the Medtronic example. Danielle and I started in that group together. So a little fun fact. You know, I agree with all of the points you made, and of course the points that Michael have made. Going back to that group at Medtronic, the other thing that stood out to me is everybody understood their roles really well, and it was very clear how you could develop within the organization. And I think that really clarified it. It put people at ease and allowed that team chemistry to develop because we understood what it took to, say, go to the next level, if you will. So I'll speak, so including that example from my past, I'll talk a little bit about my last role in advanced bionics. A number of ingredients that have already been brought up, but a couple that really stood out to me. First one was diversity in a number of ways for that group. Diversity of cultural backgrounds, of course. Diversity of education. A number of people came from different areas of expertise. Diversity of experience, some not very experienced, some very experienced within the org, some experience within other orgs that brought that best practice experience to the team. A lot of technical skill sets represented. So that really helped that team gel, but also cover their bases and not feel like we had a gap in a certain area. Alignment on the vision. I think that's already been brought up, shared goals. If you don't know, if you are not working towards the same thing, then you are not going to get there together. And so that has always stood out to me. And then finally, taking feedback very seriously. A lot of, especially large organizations, do a really good job of gathering feedback. So we do lots of surveys and employee assessments, and at Sonova we call them "Hear Me" surveys. If you know what Sonova does, it makes perfect sense. But we took it very seriously. And so if feedback was given up towards the organization, that turned into goals. So it showed our people that we cared about changing things that weren't working. You will very rarely be in a situation where everything is perfect. You're always working on fixing something. And I think leadership can drive value by showing a seriousness about the time that somebody spent giving you that feedback in the first place. And so I think all of those factors combined with what's already been said come together to create outstanding culture.
Thank you. I've written down some kind of themes that for me were standing out as you were all talking, and ultimately the things that seem to come up time and time again is really this sense of belonging team. So bringing people along, the clarity of goals, that everybody's bought into the vision and everybody has a clear understanding of like what they're shooting towards. Having also a way to measure and monitor that culture and giving people a forum to be able to feed back on that, and then turning that into goals in the company and making people feel heard. And the sense of alignment is something that that's come through time and time again through what you've all said. So these are some things that, you know, are really important, obviously, when it comes to building and starting with a great culture. I'm interested in trying to understand a little bit more your thoughts on what role does leadership play in creating that versus what kind of just letting it evolve organically. So this is my question that I'm going to throw then to Danielle.
So the leader sets the tone, right? I think one of the biggest things that a great leader does is they understand the strengths and the weaknesses of their team. They play to those strengths and those weaknesses, but they also are the ones that open up the space for the involvement of the team, right? They are the tone setters. I equate them to a conductor in a band, right? Or a conductor of an orchestra. So I think that's where I see the strength of a good leader is keeping the team on course, understanding the players that they have on their board, how to in the right ways, but also taking a step back and watching it evolve and stepping in when necessary, not hovering, but being there to lead, to guide, right, to orchestrate.
I really like the analogy with the conductor of an orchestra, to make everything play together well. Anka, what do you think?
I'll build upon what Danielle just said so well. Leading by example and leading from the front. I think it begins with that. If you are not setting the tone, then you will fail in the goal you have as the leader. I think primarily a leader's job is to be an enabler, to put our teams in the position to succeed. And so, we often talk about at any job you have your people, you have your processes, you have your projects, and people often hear this from me. If you take care of your people and give them good processes, but projects will figure themselves out. And so that's where you should spend your energy. And in that, our goal as leaders, it is primarily the combined success of the team, but also the individual success of the people on the team, because each one of those people have their own goals. And so we have to appreciate the fact that we have to take care of the individual and then take care of the team together. So as an example, and we often find this challenge in regulatory, you're going to bring somebody new on board. Ideally, they are stretching and they're learning new things, but often that learning comes with a certain amount of risk. How do you put somebody who's never been in the room with the FDA in that first meeting where they have to lead it? There is organizational risk associated with that learning. And so the job of a leader, one job at least, is to create a safe environment to stretch goals and maybe fail, but then limit the impact of the organization while allowing your team to stretch themselves and learn from their experiences. So in that way, I see leaders as enablers for the members of their team.
Thank you. And also you've got to be bold and courageous as well sometimes if you're putting people into situations where, it might not go exactly as planned. And so being able to take those decisions as well and knowing, okay, how much risk is an okay amount of risk versus, okay, where's the line, is also key. So thanks for that. I'm really interested in tactical actions though that our listeners can implement now. So Megha and Michael, this one's for you. I'd love to know some kind of advice or tips that have worked well for you as leaders when it comes to building this culture and managing your teams.
Sure, and I'm all about the actionable and the tips, because that's what really translates culture from being so amorphous to something quite tangible and doable, right? And so one of the things that I will do, and I've seen that done to me first, and now I'm passing on that goodwill, is to check in with people even while on chat. So I work with a lot of remote teams. My role is in corporate and I work across the company, which means that not only do I take care of the people on my team, but also I have some people who are members of businesses and things like that who I still consider part of my extended team. And so a very simple habit is to check in with them via chat. Hi, how was your weekend? I hope you had a good one. And sometimes I'll have responses where people come back and tell me, yes, it was a good one. They enjoyed the weather. They tell me about what they did with their kids. Or sometimes they tell me, I found out about some diagnoses, or I found out about, some other family member or a pet or something that's going on, or even good news, right? And so not only do you check in with people, it's also, I had to train myself to be bold to ask more questions on chat, or convert that chat into, do I need to follow up with another? Do I need to do a video call and just check in on them, and go where it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because there's everything to do with privacy and people wanting to, not bring all of the emotions, because maybe work is an escape, but also there's a thing about asking people and being genuinely interested in what's going on with them. Sometimes a phone call unexpectedly, they say, oh, I'm really busy, can we do this for 5 minutes, at one point in the day? Yes, just checking and saying, how are you? What can I do to make this better for you? Or are you okay? Or something like, have you spoken to your company, maybe subscribe to some sort of health service, or like an ombuds service, or like a EAP service? Have you tried calling one of those? Even those small suggestions can really help people get through some of those humps. So just saying, well done, I'm so proud of you. I just had to see you on video and say that to you face to face. I find that super liberating. Just do it on video and do it freely.
Thank you, Megha. Michael, what would you say to that?
I fully agree with Megha. I think that it is more that personal touch that we're talking about. It is far from what do we deliver on a day-to-day basis. That's important, don't get me wrong. And that's where we're measured on. But it is, as a leader, much more where are our people? What are they doing? How do they feel? And for me, I like one-on-one check-in, where I do the same as Megan. You just either we use WhatsApp, we use Teams, Instagram, I don't care. We have multiple ways on how we connect to one another. But also we have to find a way that people feel comfortable. Not everybody would like to share their Instagram account. That's not from the business. So here, getting to know each other, what people like and don't like, really helps. It opens up for open communication, not only towards me and not only to that person, but enhances over the teams. And if the team knows each other much better, it helps for us to that open communication, which then allows for open feedback. And then we can really learn from one another. So coming back to your question, one-on-ones, I really find useful in that one, but also team activities, breaking boundary sessions. It means connecting over the different teams. And it's not one team in my organization. So I have to find ways to learn from each other. Driving again, from the previous question, from a strategical perspective, because it needs to match in the end the people together with what the company wants. And I think if we match that with one-on-ones, team communication, breaking the boundary sessions, getting to know each other better, in that we perform better as a total team and as a total company.
So it's really about that personal touch and building that relationship really with the people in your team. Donielle and Ankur, do you have anything to add to that in terms of like practical, tangible tips that people can take away and implement?
I think the biggest thing is you have to know your team. So going back to what Michael and Megan both said, is you have to meet people where they are, right? Yes, companies have these overarching tools and tips and things, but it's like if you have children, all your children are not the same. They don't learn the same, they don't listen the same, they don't act the same. So you kind of have to understand the different personalities within your organization based on the diversity that you have, and a little bit cater your style to their needs, and really understanding that personal touch is very important, and the authenticity, because people know when you're faking it, right? That I think is very important. Do you genuinely care about my weekend, or are you just asking to check a box?
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I was just thinking about my own experience. When I started my journey in people management, I struggled with developing that connection to the world outside of work with my team members. And eventually, through some coaching, I realized that it's because I was uncomfortable sharing my life. And when I did, it came off perhaps as not as authentic. And so I had to train myself to be more open in order to then create a safe environment for similar sharing to occur from the other side of the table. And so looking at yourself and asking, are you doing the thing that you're asking your team members to do, is so key. Thanks for making that point, Daniel.
That's a really interesting point as well, right? To give a little bit of yourself in order to also build that trust with the team. So we've got some really good actionable tips here that hopefully our listeners can take away and implement. But I want to talk a little bit about business results and productivity, because we've spoken a lot about making people feel safe, you know, making them feel happy, giving them a space for them to share their thoughts and feelings, and all of that really lovely stuff around culture. But at the same time, as leaders, we're in a business to help the business achieve its goals, right? So how do you balance that drive for productivity and achievement at the same time as trying to keep people engaged and motivated in the softer things that we've just spoken about? Danielle, what do you think?
So I'm going to piggyback off of something Encore said earlier about people, processes, and the projects will kind of flow. One of the things I love is when a new project lands on my lap, is to actually bring my leaders together, right? At Bausch, I have 15 direct reports because I had a global role and 150 people in the org structure. When we got new projects, it was always good to bring the team together, the leaders, to talk about, when I've gone through people's IDPs, when we've gone through strengths and weaknesses, who should we assign that project to? So really making sure we really understood. We rotated people to give them different experiences so they didn't feel like they were always doing the same thing and they were bored. But also it really showed that we as leaders were taking the IDP and the, I guess, the goals and objectives very seriously, right? So people felt like they were heard and that they were getting the projects that they liked. And I always tell people, somebody has to get the project no one likes. But we tried our best to match people's skill set with the new projects. We tried to give people stretch assignments. And I think that made us very productive because a person knew, like, okay, I'm being heard. I'm being given an opportunity. I don't want to fail on this opportunity. So really looking at those things were really important to us, and it helped us to balance some of the issues. And one of the biggest things, I have to be honest, is as a leader, knowing when to say no to my leadership team, to say, guys, we have a capacity line. We have reached capacity. I will take this project, but what am I giving, right? How are we rearranging? So as a leader, to also help protect my team's peace a little bit, right? That is how we made sure we were focusing our energy on things that brought value to the company, is really by doing those things.
Anka, what I know you want to add something here.
I love it because it's just, you know, point. But I love exactly what you said, because I'm looking at my notes here and thinking, Danielle, we're already on a mind meld. I love that. So I completely agree with you. I think leading through the IDP is critical, because remember, it's people first. And so if people are being challenged and feeling like they're growing, then they're willing to stretch, because there is growth associated with that. So matching organizational goals with IDP, if you can find a way to do that, that is such a productive way to move forward. And then exactly the point you made. I would love to see a show of hands at the next time we are in person of people who say they have more resources than work. I'm pretty sure we're not going to see a lot of hands. And so we live in an environment of constant under-resourced situations. So radical prioritization is key. And as the leader, if you are not protecting your team, like Danielle said, by managing upwards and sideways within your senior leadership team, then you're letting them down, because you have to be realistic about how much time, how much FTE you have to spend. And so I completely agree with those. Maybe a point and a half I'll add to that. Calendarize non-work focused team time. I strongly believe in calendar-based time management. The one resource we cannot create more of is time. We have so many hours we can spend at work. If you don't put it on the calendars, it will not happen. And so make a habit of doing that. Heck, we did 30 minutes of team yoga once a month, and it was wonderful. I don't even do yoga. It was great. But then finally, I think we have to encourage bringing the whole person to work. We have to appreciate the fact that a job is just a part of our life, usually not even the most important part of our life. We have so many more important things going on. I just had a my first kid 2 years ago. My priorities completely changed. And so bringing the whole person to work tells your team that you appreciate the fact that yes, they have a job, but they also have a life. And so if you can maybe help a little bit in balancing those two, or at least finding synergies between those two, it shows intent, and that really matters.
Yeah. And I think that based on kind of what you're saying, it's really about seeing your team, seeing your people as not just like employees, but as whole people, and building that relationship with them so that you can have those conversations as well, even when things get tough. And we're going to come to what to do when things get tough, because I know that was a question that has been pre-registered as well. But thank you for that. So I want to go into practical steps, because I'm all about practical actions, right? Practical steps. We spoke about establishing like this one team mentality, getting people aligned, creating that sense of belonging. So what can leaders do to actually achieve that? Michael, I know this is something you're passionate about, so I'm going to throw this to you.
So, well, when we talk about one team and the steps that we can take, I to an extent, I like the phrase one team. But it sounds so easy. It is really difficult to make one team. And the bigger the team gets, the harder it is to have one team. Right. And also potentially even impossible to have really one team. You cannot make a decision with 160 people in a room. That's simply impossible. Yes, hierarchy is there. But it comes then back on what practical steps I think we can make. It links back to the first question. The answer, if I'm not mistaken, Danielle, you indicated to make sure that you have a number of goals. You have a common North Star where you work on together. And supported by a strategy that we all know. So it means that we as leaders, but also the levels under us, the leader levels, need to share the strategy. People need to understand what the strategy is and what their point of is. How do they contribute to it? And it might sometimes be as easy as just having one name, regulatory. In my case, Philips, IGT, that already creates a portion of that. But that's only a one step, or else it's just a number of people in a group, but that does not make one team. It does not make one group. And once you have that strategy and you have that clearly goals that stretch the people, I think that comes back to the previous question. If you know your people, you know how to stretch them in the right way, because we all want to grow. At least I believe we all want to grow. Then you make clear who's accountable. And that's one of those practical steps, making clear who's accountable, where the boundaries are, and where the friction is. We as leaders need to make sure that we remove that friction. It's also learnful, of course, that people learn how to deal with their own friction a bit, because it makes us grow. In the end, it's making sure that we have one way of working together. Create equality in the team and a feeling of that common overall team by that strategy, KPIs, monitoring that performance, enhancing the performance, coming back on your previous question again. I think those are the tools that you can use as practical steps by creating that strategy, making the goals, accountability, removing friction, and with that, keeping equality in the team with a common feeling of the one team perception.
Thank you. Ankur, did you have anything to add to that? It was a good answer.
You know what? As Michael was talking about this, I was thinking about this question. And Elena, as you made an inference to, I think in that remote first world, sometimes, especially when we have distributed teams, getting that same one team feeling gets harder. And I bring this up not because I have the solution. It's because I really want to know all of your opinions on how to do that, because I struggle with it. Megha, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Ankur. So we all come from what sounds like quite large organizations that report into us and we influence. And so even though we are thinking about, I really like how Michael said that the bigger the team grows, the harder it is to get that one team feeling. But let's not forget, it's one interaction at a time. And so that's what starts to have the domino effect of that one team feeling. So from my perspective, to what Ankur said, time is our most valuable resource. So while working in this one team, I've seen so often that there is such a lost sense of sometimes meeting scheduling etiquette for people working across time zones, right? Just take a minute to see where that person is based. If you know what that person's background is and you know that they have life outside of work, try not scheduling at a time when it's convenient to you. Like, just try to accommodate and schedule it when it's convenient to them, especially if you need something from them. So it's okay for leaders to take a little bit of that humble pie and work in that way. We have colleagues who join from Asia Pacific, and they have to talk to sometimes people in Europe and in the US at the same time. So instead of getting them to stay awake at ungodly hours of the night, we'll wake up once in a way to hear them, and then we'll shuffle it around. So we'll give that respect to each other regardless of where you are in the hierarchy. And to me, that's embracing everyone as a team. Everyone's respected, whether you're a regulatory specialist who just started this year, all the way up to the VP of regulatory, right? And this is a basic thing we can do. There's also another thing that I've started to do that I learned was being a barrier to people contacting me informally. There's a lot of power in informal connections, and as workplaces get more hybridized or more remote, these water cooler conversations don't happen as often as enough. And what I notice is it's far more for people who are purely virtual. And so turning on your available sign in your company chat for a few hours per day, even if it's 1 to 2 hours per day, it sometimes encourages those reticent people to come forward and approach you and have that water cooler chat. I've experienced this, and I think sometimes it's as my light goes from red, unavailable, or in a meeting, to green. I've seen someone waiting and then just send me a message quickly on, hey, can we have a quick chat? And it's a privilege to be able to say yes and engage on those conversations. So, both making yourself available and respecting each other's time zones, I would say, are practical steps to start to have that one team feeling. We're all in this together, and we're going to respect each other in achieving what we need to achieve.
And treating other people how you would like to be treated, basically. Danielle, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so to kind of give some practical to what Mega just said, I used to do this thing called No Meeting Fridays, right? I think in our world, we meet to talk about when the next time we're going to meet. And I don't know about you guys, but that meant that I was always in meetings from 7 a.m. to sometimes 7 p.m. with the global, and then doing work till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night sometimes. So I had made a policy for myself, and I told that to my team, and I supported them, that I took no meetings on Fridays. Fridays were my day to slow think and to sit available on my teams for any informal questions, quick chats, but no scheduled meetings. Fridays just became my no scheduled meeting day. I need to be able to slow think. I need to be available to my team if they have problems, issues, and even my stakeholders. They could ping me and say, oh, you're green, right? Instead of me being red from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., I would be green all day on Fridays, right? And I share that with my stakeholders too, so that they manage their expectations as well. Now, things come up and you may have to change, but my norm was no meetings on Fridays.
That's really good, because also it lets people know that you're available, and it carves out that time to what Anka said. Like, I'm also a really big believer in living by your calendar. And what we found as a company, in particular in COVID, right, it's to what Mega was saying, those water cooler conversations, they're a lot harder to have happen when everybody's remote and people are working from home and everybody's busy and working and they've got their diaries blocked out. And actually what we found to work really well at that time was just carving out time for, like, we're actually going to do a virtual lunch. Or we're going to actually just like put time in the diary for a chat as a company, because then it fosters that space for those types of conversations to be able to occur. Guys, I can't believe how quickly time is going, but we're basically at the live Q&A, and we haven't got through some of the questions that I know we wanted to get through. So we're going to add those to the Slido. So if you're listening, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bring up a QR code. if you haven't already, scan this QR code, because it's now going to take you to Slido, where there's a load of pre-registered questions, plus some additional questions that we're adding right now on other topics regarding creating a great team culture that we want to put to our panelists. So if you've got a burning question that you want to have answered, add it in. If you don't have a burning question but are just curious, scan through and see, are there any questions in there that for you feel really important? And if so, give them a thumbs up. They will rise to the top of the list, and we're going to address these questions from top down. So panelists, are you ready? Have you had your sip of water? We're going to go into some live Q&A now, and we're going to address some of the questions that some of our audience members have put forward to us. So I'm going to get started with a question from Beatrice. So it says, and it's going to come into chat as well for you panelists, so don't worry too much about me just saying it, but I'm going to read it for your benefit anyway. When you are a project leader but have no people directly reporting to you, how do you engage people and make them accountable to their part of the project? This is I hear this question a lot. So who wants to take that?
I'll take it.
Danielle.
So before I was a people leader, I was a project manager, right? And so what you have to be able to do is influence without authority, is what I tell people, right? You have, and it's some of the same skills that you do as a people leader is great to do as a project leader. Everyone has to understand the goals of the project, understand the role that they play within the project, and have a space where they can come to the project leader to say, either I am unclear of my role and responsibilities, I'm having difficulties, how can I help with those roles and responsibilities? But even though you do not manage them, you need to be able to influence them to get the job done, because at the end of the day, the project leader is responsible for the overall success or failure of the project.
I just want to ask a follow-up question to this one, because I get the concept. However, in practice, what do you do if you're a project leader and you're responsible and accountable for a project? There's somebody on that project, they understand what they need to do, but ultimately they just don't do it, and you have no authority as their line manager. What do you do?
So that has actually happened to me before.
Okay.
And I have actually sat down with the person and their line manager and clearly outlined where I saw the project was going astray, and then sat back and said, how can I help? So not blaming, but saying, hey, look, you had a deliverable that was due last week. And not only was it missed, I didn't know it was going to be missed before it was missed. So is there anything that we can do to support you, to help you? So being like, me and your line manager are here to support you. We want you to be successful. But bringing the line manager in, because you can't let certain behavior go for so long. So if I have somebody on my project team that is not living up to the expectation, it now becomes a group thing for us to get this person back on track, or for the line manager to say, you know what, I'm going to have to replace this person, or I'm going to have to do disciplinary action. I try to work with people before I get to that step. But the reality is you are going to have to bring in the line manager at some point. Also, maybe having the conversation with the line manager of, where does this project fit in your person's priority? Maybe they need some help, or maybe they're not the right person for this project. Encore.
Thanks, Danielle. Such a good point. And you're speaking from a place of experience, having had responsibility for project management. I'll speak from a place of working with someone who did this really well. And so one of the practices that this person she instituted was to block off about 30 minutes a month with the leader of the key members of their project team, and on a monthly basis review their FTE allocation. Because a key failure mode in these situations is when somebody's on too many projects, yep, and they are prioritizing based on their own assessment of it. And one of the ways to solve that is to know in advance whether they're over allocated. And so this person, she sat down on a monthly basis with me, went through her projects. She had 3 different projects which she had regulatory members from my team, and just went through, hey, how's this person doing for FTE this month? So she was putting the onus on me to tell her that I had enough time blocked off for that person. So just in a very practical way, she set that expectation that I must assign that person's time to that project. and that sets the tone for prioritization downstream. So just a practical example.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's about bringing in the line manager if you need to have that conversation. It's about having the difficult conversations where you see things not being met as expected, and also keeping the flow of communication with the line manager, and if you can, in advance before it happens. So I really
proactively.
I really like those. Thank you. Okay, so here's a question, and a very pertinent one. So how do you keep spirit high when the situation is very uncertain and unclear? Michael.
Happy to take this one, because I think, well, for most of us, if you know the situation of the company that I work for, we know that this has been a challenge upcoming time. When you're under a consent decree, people really tend to feel the worst. So I have it all there. So indeed, I would keep the spirit high on very uncertain and unclear times. And maybe consent decree is one, but also I think during COVID, a lot of things have happened in the last 5 years. So I think it links back to points that we have discussed earlier, to have that communication with the people. I think it's very important to know what your people are feeling, because in the end, we're all human and there's more than work on that one. So reaching out to understand what's going on, but also from a leader and leadership perspective, share what is going on, what is going well, because people see a lot the negative in life, but there's so much positive as well. So look at that, focus on that one. In that, you will find somewhere in the middle. You will find a person that might be very positive at this point, but let's take the example negative due to circumstances, and then a company that has a very challenging point. Have regular check-in to make sure that the person is doing well, the person looks at the positive side, and as well as the company looking at the side. And those together will bring, in the end, the team to the next level as well, because part of our job is bringing bad news. But for that, we also need to look at the future. What will the future bring? Where are we now? What can we do? Also, therefore, scope it. Not everything is in our power. So make that understandable that not everything is in our power. And where we have influence, focus on influence on the right thing for our people, but also for ourselves.
Thank you so much. Megha, you've raised your hand.
Yes, I think it's whether you're in consent decree or COVID or just economic downturn, reduction in numbers is such a reality for so many of us, right? And I from the nodding heads on the panel, I can say everyone's been, either on the receiving end or on the other side of it. It's never a very positive thing to do. It's difficult for everyone, the team that's leaving. It's difficult for the team that's staying back. It's an overall quite a negative environment. I think at those times, there are a few things to kind of hold on to, aside from Michael saying how we need to focus on the positive, talk about the positives. Aside from that, I think it becomes a leader's responsibility to continue removing any barriers to execution. What often happens is that when people leave, or there's an exit of a certain group, some of the processes that were well established don't work so well together anymore. And it's really important to bring those up, and whatever the leader can do to eliminate those obstacles, or even have to change processes quickly and in an agile manner to make it more manageable, I think that is super important. And you need to be seen to be doing that and encouraging that kind of behavior. This doesn't work anymore. Here's a possible fix, can be implemented. That kind of thinking needs to be very sort of encouraged. And for whatever you do, like if times get tough, don't let development plans go. It's so easy to say that it's economically difficult environment. Travel is restricted. Often travel is one of the first things to go, right, when things get really tough. How can we continue developing our staff with the resources we have? Can we spread the love around a little bit more? Can we do some group interventions? Can we do something that are experience-based rather than acquiring knowledge-based? How can we foster a collective learning experience? What can we do creatively to keep focus on that development, both on an individual and sort of a group level? So I'd say those are quite important to both do authentically and to demonstrate that okay, the environment is tough and it's a phase, because business is all about ups and downs, right? So where there is a tough, there'll be a trough, there'll be a crest, and so on and so forth. But there are some things that we hold very sacred. Performance is important, but it's also important to develop and have that ability to look at things and say, are they value add? And if they're not, and they're a waste of time, and these processes don't work, can we do things differently now? So to give people that agency of, not still attaching themselves to non-value add things.
Thank you, Megha. Donielle, Ankur, do you have anything to add to that? No, let's keep going, guys. I'm gonna just share my screen again to the QR code, because I know we've got people on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn watching us, hello. We hope you're enjoying the session. I can't see the comments that you're putting, and I know that there's some interesting questions there. So please scan this QR code. If you are joining us on LinkedIn Live or even in Zoom, scan this QR code that you can see on the screen right now, because it's going to take you to Slido. And on Slido, you can upvote the questions that you really want to have answered, and you can add your own questions and comments in there as well, so we can address as many of them as possible. And with a view to do that, I'm going to stop sharing and jump into the next question, which is, how do you handle work conflict so that residual tension does not continue to affect the team after the incident? Nice question. So who's going to take that one? Michael?
Yeah, I can also go second, but no, I think it's core to people management, and it doesn't really matter if you look at the other question about team project management or people management direct, but this, I think, comes to the core. How do you solve tensions in the team? Because naturally, where humans are there, tension will be there. I think what you shouldn't do, maybe let's start with that one, not address it. It's really important to go into the conversation. I know the courageous conversation is challenging. How I generally do it, I have, depending a little bit, I try to know my people, depending a little bit on the person. I might first have a meeting with each of them separately and then together. I might also do it the other way, to have them directly together, but it might also be in a unique situation, and I have had it in the past, when you already know that this is the second, third, or fourth time that something happens, and there's simply a chemistry challenge. In that case, you might need to go into the more challenging area and include the HR role therein as well. And it might be that you need to do that if that's not directly in your reporting line with the people managers on top. But in that unique cases, make sure you always address it. And that might rigorously go to HR and meet leaders and so on, but never leave that tension burrowing underneath. Because it might not pop up today, but it might pop up tomorrow or the week after. And especially during those challenging situations that you work in a project, in an organization, then it will arise. And then there is no time to address it in the right manner. So try to solve it as soon as possible with a human touch to it, making sure that you understand why it is there. Because every story has two sides. And I hardly have seen that people come to the work intentionally to annoy people, to make a mess at work, and so on. So always think of the goodness of the heart and then address the situation from each side.
Thank you.
My 2 cents.
So, brilliant answer. Have the difficult conversation and go into it. So let's keep going, guys, because there's so many questions here now. So, what are some red flags in a team culture that might lead to high turnover rates?
Burnout. Burnout is the biggest one. I think during COVID, we talked about the do more with less culture, burnout. And I think one elephant that we don't talk about a lot is the economy. The change economy, I mean, inflation is growing at a rate of 8 to 10%. We are not getting raises 8 to 10%. Our salaries are not growing in line with like inflation. So you have people that are jumping, not because they don't like the job, but they know they can get 10, 15% more if they go to another company, right? So when you start hearing people talk about salaries, when you get to performance review time and they're expecting, something that that you can't give them, you already know that's a red flag to me that they're probably looking because money is important to them. Or if I am constantly having conversations with them because I see them online really late. And I was really bad at this. I was a bad leader from the perspective of I would still be working at 10 o'clock at night my time. And so my team expected that they needed to do the same. And burnout on my side and their side was very high. Stress, the irritability, all the signs that you see that come with burnout. People are like, okay, I'm going to go look for something else. I'm going to go do consulting. So for me, the two biggest indicators are burnout and salary, like demands or expectations, are the two biggest red flags that I see that the team is looking or people are looking for something else.
Thanks, Danielle. Has anyone got anything to add?
Yes, I completely agree with what Daniel just said. Perhaps the only other thing I'll add to this is to the point about addressing challenges within the team. I think it's really critical for us to very visibly reward good results, good behavior, and also just as visibly address activities that are not helping the team. And so to do active performance management, but also at the same time, make sure we're talking about success and rewarding success. So giving time to both sides of that coin ensures that there is a clear connection between outcomes and then the reward associated with it.
Thank you, Ankur. I've got something to add as well, because of course, in my job, I'm speaking to people at that point of them, thinking about making those moves. And one of the things, another red flag I think leaders can look for is a lack of interest, right? So if you have someone who has been like super engaged on something, generally has been like really involved, but then all of a sudden you start to see a change in behavior, to perhaps they're just not as available as what they used to be, or they just don't care as much, things might come a little bit later. At that point, they've probably already started thinking, or probably already have that one foot out of the door. And so that's also something to look out for, that change in behavior from someone who's usually really highly motivated to kind of being less interested. So that's my addition to that point as well. Let's keep going, guys, because we've got less than half an hour and we've got so many questions to ask, to answer. So next one is, what does the panel think about building strong management bonds through positive experiences and regular check-ins? Does it feel too much like micromanaging?
I think those. Sorry, Ankur.
Ankur, let's start with Ankur.
Okay, it doesn't have to be. Check-ins shouldn't be about project updates. Check-ins should be about, again, bringing the whole person to work and making sure we acknowledge and appreciate that before we start talking about projects. So don't just jump into project conversations first. I'll just make that point and then I'll pass it on to Megha.
Megha.
Oh, great point, Ankur. The two concepts of checking in and micromanagement they don't have to coexist. A one-to-one, typically from a good or best practice perspective, is driven by the employee. And you can split your one-to-one into what your performance goals are, your development goals are, and have a bit of time for just catch up in general and how you're feeling and how you're performing. So it really doesn't need to go into the details unless the employee chooses to go into those details. Where a manager chooses to go into the details, that may be based on feedback from elsewhere, like say another project manager coming and telling them, how things are going. And so therefore those questions have to be from a place of curiosity, not from a sense of trying to dig in and see and try your own way to do it in the way you would. So to me, that's a red flag. You want to keep those things quite separate.
Anyone else got anything to add to that point?
I think on this one as well, it's about open communication, because I cannot judge what another person feels. If my team member feels that I micromanage, we would have to have a conversation, because that might not be my intent, as Megha as well indicate. It's not the intent, but it still can come across. So I think this is about having that communication. When I spoke about in the previous question about the difficult conversation, also that needs to go the other way around. As long as you have a good bond with, let's say, employee and managers, but in the end, we're all human, being able to share openly what you feel about this, if this is micromanagement or not, and also understand and then explain in that way, sometimes micromanagement is needed. It's not always a bad thing. Does it feel bad? I'm pretty sure it feels bad. But then we also need to make sure that we make it clear, why do we do this? Why do we feel that we need to micromanage, and get a good conversation in why this is in this case the case, and it might be needed, but it should never be the intent of the communication. I think Megan as well as Angor, it is about my one-on-ones. I prefer not to talk too much about the content. That's why we have my daily management boards, and we talk about the content with the team, but I talk one-on-one about you, about your development to the future, how you're doing as a person. And it hardly comes to any content discussion, deep content discussion. Yet also there, let's be honest, it might feel from a cultural perspective as micromanagement or going above boundaries. So there as well, learn from each other. What is your culture? What's culturally appropriate and not in that way? I see Ankur has raised his hand.
Sorry, Daniel, just one slight segue, but you made a really good point about having a forum for project conversations versus the check-in, the one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much value in having project conversations in a group setting, because you learn from osmosis and you get better alignment. And so, you mentioned daily management for those who are practitioners of the process. To be able to have that conversation in a group setting, you are imparting that knowledge across the board. You're building flexibility, depth within your team, and you're utilizing the one-on-one time for where it is most effective on building that one-on-one connection. So thank you. Thanks for letting me jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything the panelists have all said. And I think one of the things I would add is, if you work across cultures, the term micromanagement means something totally different. So one of the things that I do in the first 90 days as I'm getting to know my team is truly getting to know their expectation of me, getting to know them as a person, but also how I can best support them. And I will say, my teams in China, what they need is not what my team in the US needs. What I give China, if I gave that to the US would think I was micromanaging them. If I didn't give it to China, they would be lost, right? Because we've had this conversation of their expectation, what they believe, because I actually throw it out there. How do I not micromanage you? How do we best communicate so that you don't feel like I am micromanaging you? And the answers are so different. And you have to take note and communicate to people where they are, based on their culture, based on their experiences, based on how you get the best out of them.
Thanks, Danielle. That's a really good point, because, sometimes people are so afraid to be micromanagers that what they do is they undermanage, and then you have the opposite, people feeling completely unsupported and like their manager doesn't care and isn't available for them. So actually having that conversation at the beginning of, how do I get the best out of you? What are your expectations of me? And, then building around that creates that strong foundation. Megha, you've got something to add as well?
Yes, I do want to pick up on a point that both Michael and Daniel made about culture, right? You need to have so much cultural awareness and reflection in yourself to not only understand the nuances of micromanagement, but to understand the style and the psychological safety you're creating to get that feedback from your team members to tell you honestly where your style of management is working for or against them. And so there are some cultures that are far more forward in that sort of cross-hierarchy conversations, where there are some other cultures where it's not that easy. So it's really important to go into that conversation knowing whom you're talking to. And it cannot be stereotyped by geography alone sometimes, because you do have that cross-correlation. You do have migrants. You do have people bringing their cultures with them and bringing their understanding and their sense of hierarchy. And therefore, whom are you going in that conversation with? Is this person able to give me the feedback that I'm seeking, and can I continue sharpening the way I am with them, so then that match is better work for both of us?
Thank you, Megha. Before we go to the questions on Slido, I have a question to follow up on that then, because you've set this up beautifully for me, which is, how do you get feedback? How do you actually get feedback on your management style? We've spoken already about like the more formal types of forums, right? Michael's spoken about employee surveys and stuff like that. But do any of you have questions that work really well that you can ask, or tools that you use in order to get this feedback? Megha, you were nodding your head, so why don't you start us off?
Sure. I had a lovely manager who would want to ask for feedback, but would leave it for the last 3 minutes of the conversation, right? The annual conversation. 3 was a luxury, last minute. So there was really no time to talk about it. So definitely don't do it that way. Typically, I lead with areas that I felt like I was either uncomfortable or lacking, or maybe I felt like it didn't come across as authentic. So, for instance, when I don't know how someone likes to receive recognition, or an or reward, and I've done it to the best of what I know are the tools available with me, I often ask them, was that enough? This is what we did. What else would you think is appropriate for this? Or I will bring specific examples to frame that discussion, rather than ask a very open-ended question, because sometimes I think it's very easy to overwhelm people asking that question, and it depends on the setting that you ask that question into. That person is almost on a back foot and needing to say positive things. So I will try and pick out examples of where I think it didn't go well with that self-reflection, or say, do you have an example of where it could have gone better, and things like that. So that's how I do it.
Thank you, Megha. Danielle?
So I, in a past experience, actually brought in an executive coach to the team, where I do a once-a-year retreat where I bring in my entire team together. I try to do it face-to-face, and during COVID, we did it virtually. And then the next year, when things opened up, we did it face-to-face. But I brought in a facilitator or a coach where I stepped out and gave the team space to have free conversation without me being present. And then the coach brought me back in, where she was able to summarize that feedback. And then I was able to sit there and kind of take that all in, without the team feeling, not everybody is able to provide free feedback. Even though for me, I think feedback is a gift. People like, if I tell my boss she's doing this, I'm going to get the crappy project or the crappy this. So I found that using a third party, once a year, I do it once a year. And then I sit there and I'll circle back with the team in like a one-on-one and say, this is what I heard. These are things that I'm going to do, maybe differently in the future. And I'm okay with you saying, you know what, this isn't working, this is working, and open up the floodgates of, you can also give me feedback. It's not a one-way street of me giving you feedback. You can feel comfortable coming to me with feedback.
And sometimes having that third party is just, it detaches yourself from it. I listened to a podcast, and one thing that I took away in how to ask for feedback is similar to what Megha was saying. Be specific around like where you're trying to get feedback, and then don't ask the question then and there, but ask it in advance and ask them to bring one thing. So like, when it comes to the way we structure our meetings, what's one thing that we could do to make it better next time? And give them a bit of space to digest it and bring that idea. But there you're being like more specific about what you want the feedback on, and you're only asking for one thing. So it's better than just like, hey, have you got feedback for me? Which is the general kind of fallback question that people fall on. That doesn't ever yield very good results. So, okay, I want to keep going, because there's a really interesting question here, and I'd love all of your insights on this one, which is around, are there any tried and tested approaches towards merging two cultures in an organizational integration? the big one. So Michael's smiling.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. It resonates through a big portion of the conversation already, because it will hit on multiple aspects. When you talk about culture, we talk about people culture, what is your background? On top of that, then we add company culture. So when we then merge two of the different companies together, then you will have four-dimensional cultures. We really need to think on each of the people, how do they stand into it? A portion of the team will probably feel that they just lost something. If you have been working, let's say, a decade for a company, you're called this as a company, this as a function, and out of the blue you will be called something new. And you might still work at, let's say, a medical device organization, but you work in under a different name. You lost a portion of your identity. You work in a quality management system, with colleagues, accountability that all that, especially from the team that is acquired, will change. But also from the other side, the team that acquires will change significantly. What I think there is the key, and the try and tested approach is, again, conversation. Because you should not just use the acquired company's culture as the new status quo. You shouldn't lose that knowledge, that culture that is there in the other company, and forget it. So it's about communication, again, making sure you make a strategy where that two cultures combine, use the best way of the culture. Think of how people work, listen to one another, and really try to step in the shoes of the other one. Again, might lose their personality partly or identity, acquire a new one. So try to step into the shoes, and I think that really helps in merging organization. I've done it in a couple of cases, and it's really difficult, but trying to understand is the first start.
Thank you, Danielle.
So I've been on probably 10 acquisitions and divestitures over the last 8 years, right? And I've worked for large companies when we've done them. You set the tone at the integration team, because as regulatory, we're only a piece of merging those two cultures. So because I sit on those integration teams, I try to offer the voice of, we need to actually move slow. Especially if it's if we're not acquiring a startup, we're acquiring something large. It's how do we move slow? Because what we don't need is a mass exodus of the people from the company that we're acquiring, because we will lose all of that institutional knowledge. So it's really about the leader sitting at the table amongst other leaders saying, what's the best way to do an integration? And then when I bring it down to regulatory, to my function, I have a person from my team that I partner with a person from the new company, and we cross-share ideas. We talk about how we do things, because there's some things that are going to be non-negotiable, and that's not going to be something that I can change. But how do I make it where you feel welcomed into the family, right? I use some of the same tactics I use when I bring in new employees to my group. You give them a buddy. Right? You give them our core competencies, but leave room for them to bring with them their experience. And so those are, I think, ways that I think when you're merging two companies, because technically, I hate to say it, you never really merge two companies. Somebody buys somebody else, and the way of the world is sometimes there's going to be room for us to mingle and mix. And sometimes it's going to be like, nope, we bought you, and this is how it goes. It's just, how do you make that smooth? And the buddy system I find works, and taking it slowly.
Thank you, Danielle. Megha, did you have something to add to that?
No, I'd say that I really resonated with the acquirer and the acquiree mentality, right? And it's one of my former managers said this, and it stayed with me forever. Change is great when it's happening to someone else, not to you. It's always fantastic. And so I haven't been in a position to be acquired, but I was thinking about a best practice that I have seen from someone who's done it well. And they, from a very practical perspective, when the teams met and they had this introduction, there was all this perceived awkwardness, us versus them mentality. And what we did around that room was everyone spoke about what they were most proud of where they worked. And so that starts to give you some ideas on what's worth preserving from the culture that the team is bringing that's coming to you. So for me, just the way that person facilitated that conversation and people spoke with pride and about what was very good. And there was then that follow-up, right? These are the parts that we want to keep. And then as they were talking about it, some of the people on the acquiring side, the acquirers side, wow, that's a great way of doing it. What can we do to sort of move in that direction? And that starts to really cross-pollinate some ideas. So yes, of course, you're being bought over, but are there some things that you bring that we can, adopt and make our own and meld together better? So that stands out.
Thank you, Megha. Guys, we're in the last 3 minutes, so I think we've got space for one more question. And I was just having a glance through what we've got. So we've covered off quite a lot of these themes. So we've covered off themes around how to lead remotely, how to create belonging, how to create a one-team mentality. We've spoken about dealing with adversity and fostering open communication. One question that I wanted to ask actually is around outliers. So we've spoken about the importance of, like, you create this unified culture, or as a company you have this culture. Let's say you've got somebody in the team and you've done everything you can to bring them on board, but you're not seeing them as a cultural fit, but they're a great performer. What do you do? Anyone?
You take a look at the culture. So I struggle when we say cultural fit in companies, because it brings up the questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. And as someone who has actually been told in the past that they did not fit the culture of a company, I walk those fine lines. So if I have someone who is a strong performer and I'm hearing people say they don't fit the culture, I actually probe more of the why on the culture than I do the person. I question more the culture than I do the person. Because obviously, if this person really is a strong performer, they are bringing something to the table that we may not be looking close enough at. And we may have to hold up the mirror to our face as a company, especially the senior leadership team, to say, have we become an exclusive club? And do we want that exclusivity? Yes. Then this person's not there. But if we want to be inclusive, and if we value diversity, and if we believe that diversity in culture, thought, educational background will make us a better company, then sometimes we may need to be the ones to make a change.
Right. Very good point.
Yeah.
I've had the experience of someone on my team being that perceived outlier, and they were an outlier. It is not the question of misplaced diversity or lack of inclusion, but it's just how they went about doing their things, undermining people at meetings, undercutting them, sort of creating a scenario where they were calling into questions quite publicly what this other regulatory person was saying. And a lot of regulatory is interpretation, dealing with the gray and all of that. A lot of it hinges on a lot of good research as well. So this person would bring up these doubts and questions and create that doubt in other people's minds as well. At first, I was really annoyed because I said, I don't want any of that on my team, right? This is not happening on my watch, because I've been done that too, not from a regulatory person, from another person being thrown under the bus. I didn't want that for the people on my team. But I was kind of in reflection, and with some help from my HR partner, really became curious about what is it this person is trying to say to us under the subtext, behaving in this way, and not trying to fit in with where everyone else was kind of looking more cohesive than this one person. We got to the bottom of it. Ultimately, this person was basically colored by past experiences and felt like they needed to behave that way to just protect themselves, and that was their insecurity. It took a little bit of time, but I'm so glad for the intervention of this HR person who didn't let me lose faith in this person. I think I want to say we turned the person to a certain extent. They left to join another company, another business, but I think that we started to see a turn in their behavior to the point where they started trusting the team more. So we thought it was an underlying insecurity issue that was outwardly presenting itself as not fitting in with a team, being an outlier. So don't lose faith in those people is what I would say.
Thank you, Megha.
I do think you indicate there you took action. And I think that's the key as well. It is not to ignore it. I think that's one. And second, if it really becomes destructive, it might also go the other way around. Because Daniela, Megan, you both give a good example, but it can also turn bad. It should never be at one point plague that comes through your team, because you have to manage the team overall. So if I take it more from a negative side, which we have, we're leaders, so we have the positive and the negative. Yeah, then you do need to do something as well. But I think always we have to look at the person, and I look at the time, so we'll keep this answer very short. Really look at the person, because they might not be a right fit. If they're not a right fit, I still consider it my task to look if I can find that person the right spot. That might be in my team, that might be outside of my team, that might even be outside of the organization. But if there is truly not a match, for different reasons, I think it's our responsibility as well to make sure that a person finds a right spot. If that's a cultural match or not, that it's about us as people to making sure that we take care of the people, not excluding just by simply it doesn't fit in the culture, because I don't like that sentence, but just as an example that we also then need to take action, finding a new opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, guys. So, Ankur, I'm really sorry to cut this conversation, but guys, we are in the last 2 minutes of the episode, and I promised everybody we would finish on time. But I will encourage everybody, if you are not already following these amazing people on LinkedIn, please follow them. They are all thought leaders in their space, and I'm sure that if you message them, you might hear back, if they're not too busy, on some of these themes. But you can definitely catch this episode as well on Elemed's website. I'm going to go into Slido and I'm going to launch this poll, because I'm curious to know, if you've listened to the session today, are you going to be attending the next session that we have coming up? And I'm going to tell you more about that. Look at your Slido and you should be seeing a question that is, what did you learn, actually? The biggest learning. So please, please let us know what your biggest learning was. Let's have a look. What have we got? What did you learn? Have the difficult conversation. The human touch is the best way forwards. Building strong connections. So it's all the human element, guys, and that's what these sessions are all about. So the next question then is, are you going to be attending the next session? That poll should be running any second now, hopefully. Will you be attending the next session? I'm interested to know if you found this valuable. Everybody says yes so far. Lots of yeses. So that's really good feedback. Just a quick one on Elemed. If you don't know, we specialize in total talent management, hiring, compliance projects, and skills data and insights. You'll find out more on our website about what we do. Reach out to me if you have any questions. We also have lots of value outside of just recruitment and talent management. We've got the MDR Forum. We've got Career Diaries by Elemed podcast. We've got these future leader sessions. And also we've got Elemed's Mentoring Academy, all designed to help people in their careers, not just when they're looking for a job, but all the time. If you scan this QR code, we're building a software survey on regulatory affairs, software specifically. So we're gathering people's feedback on what are the best tools and solutions out there for regulatory, and we're going to publish it in a report. So scan that QR code to get it and to find out what the feedback is on who are the best solution providers in the market. And finally, I've got one more slide. I hope. I don't. But we will be sending you some more information on our next session, which is all about building amazing teams. Obviously, that's our speciality. So look forward for more information on that session. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you, guys. You were absolutely amazing. We had hundreds of people listening to this episode today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us all over the world. That's it from me. That's it from Elemed. And that's it from our amazing panelists on creating a great team culture. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.